or whatever, but the serial killer said that his partner killed this person and buried the body somewhere, but we can't ask him because he's dead now. But everywhere I read, they're like, I guess there will never be any leads, or we'll never know what really happened to Cindy Song. But like, can't we like assume at least? Like, the dude's naming all these people that him and his partner killed, and then he specifically says that there's this one you'll never find. Yet everyone on the internet, they're like, I just will never know. Todd McAfee was the owner of a tomato farm in Manatee County, Florida. He lived on a house at the tomato farm himself, and it was customary every morning that he would come out to the gate and lock it and lock it. However, on August 18th, his foreman thought it was odd that he didn't come to let them in, so while the men were working, he went to the house to check on it. Looking at Todd's vehicle that was parked in front, the keys were still in the car as well as a bag of groceries. In the truck was blood as well as Todd's bloodless glasses. This caused the foreman to call the police, which during an investigation, Todd's body was discovered in a ditch 2 miles away. He had been shot 4 times before being left in the ditch, and since Todd was known for having a very expensive gun collection, which was missing after the murders, it's believed that's why he was targeted for killing. The leading theory is that Todd was getting back from his home and maybe saw something amiss in his house, which would explain why he left the groceries in the passenger seat before going inside and being attacked or being thrown into the bed of the truck, shot to death at something, and thrown into the ditch. What's wild is, despite the prominence that this person had in the community and supposedly as loud a crime as this is, no one has ever been arrested or tried for it. The only lead is that people driving by the night before said they saw a van in front of Todd's house. However, that photo itself has never been identified. Jenny Lau Chang was a 19-year-old student at San Francisco State University. On September 11th of 1977, Jenny had left her apartment on her unit and she was going to a study session that evening. Jenny didn't come home that night, to which the next day the unit reported campus security, to which at nearly the same time on the 4th floor reading room of the library, faculty opened up that morning to find her body naked, stabbed, and beaten in the corner of a reading room. So the theory would have to be, since those rooms were locked up every night, that it had to be someone who would have a key to that room who could be killed. However, on a campus that size, that's anywhere from 400 to 1,200 people depending. And here's what's especially wild about this whole case. That's it. A girl was murdered and placed into a building at the college that she attended with supposedly a ton of faculty, security, and other people around, and all of it somehow got away with it. To give you an idea of how little people knew about this killing itself, several people theorized that it was a Zodiac killing, which it wasn't because there was no Zodiac scheme, but that's how desperate people were to find it. Arthur Buddy Schumacher disappeared from his home on July 24th of 1925 in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Buddy was known to go with his friends train hopping in order to get to their favorite swimming hole in the summer. However, one day after coming back with a group of friends and then splitting to walk off to his house, he disappeared. 7 weeks later, his body was found less than a mile away, very horribly mutilated with a handkerchief placed in his throat. The initial story of the other 3 boys was that whenever they hopped off the train, there was a hobo on it who increased them out. This sparked a huge war on the homeless in the town, in which every vagabond was being sweared at and pelted by people nearby, and the police were just arrested en masse. However, the boys later changed their story, saying it was a homeless person who made it up, and they came up with all these wild stories like seeing him get chased away by some crazy killer, and it became clear that the boys were just saying stuff that they thought was cool. There were a few people who were picked out as possibly maybe a suspect. Every time that a witness would come forward with evidence, they would change the story on it, and it seems sadly like the story of Buddy will simply remain unsolved. The Hall Mills murders occurred on September 16th, 1922, and was the largest covered in United States history at the time. Eleanor Mills and Edward Hall were found both shot in a field near Somerset, New Jersey. Both of them were shot in the head, the woman being shot 3 times. The man was positioned with his hat over his face and a business card at his feet. The woman was bruised, and the autopsy later said that her tongue was cut out, and they were positioned to be romantically touching each other, between them being a series of love letters between the two, as it was later figured out that Edward Hall was the pastor of a church, and Eleanor Mills was a choir, and the 2 had been having an affair. The first, only, and most obvious suspects was that of Edward's wife and her brothers. The details of the court trial following this murder are so weird. The only witness to it was the farm's owner, a woman by the name of Jane Gibson, who was later called in media as the pig girl, who claimed that while getting the chickens out in the morning, she saw silhouettes of people over by the hillside where they were murdered before getting gunshots, so she hopped on her donkey and began to chase after them. Although her story kept changing back and forth, and for some reason I couldn't find at the end of the court case she had to be wheeled in on a hospital bed to testify for some reason. And theories of this case went from everything to the KKK did it, to the Illuminati, to a double suicide where the gun just disappeared for some reason. And while most, including myself, believe that Edward's wife and her brothers did it, the case is still officially unsolved. However, it's so popular that it gave rise to several books, plays, and movies that occurred afterwards. Some even believe that the characters were an inspiration for the lead characters in The Great Gatsby. Which, spoilers if you don't know The Great Gatsby, but like the book's been out for what, like 100 years now. The Delphi murders took place on Valentine's Day 2017 in Delphi, Indiana. Abigail Williams and her friend Elizabeth Sherman were going on a hike near the Moonbridge Trail of the Delphi area. At 2:07 p.m., Liberty, also who went by Libby, posted a picture of the two of them on the hike on Instagram, and that was the last heard from them. After the girls didn't come back, a search and rescue team went out, which found their bodies located off the side of the trail. When they didn't return home that day, a search and rescue party went out in order to find the girls, and they found their bodies located just off the trail that night. To this day, 4 years later, the cause of death has not been announced publicly, supposedly because of the details of the case. However, it has been announced that on analyzing Libby's phone, she had taken pictures of the man that supposedly killed them. In the pictures that Libby took, we can see a man who is wearing jeans and what appears to be a denim jacket walking towards the girls. Not only that, but she took a short recording when the phone was in her pocket, which is amazing that she had the foresight to think of that, in which we can hear the man say the phrase, "down the hill." However, sadly, having that short audio clip and this one sort of blurred picture isn't enough to exactly ID someone off of, but it's so frustrating that the answers are that close, and on top of it, that the girls possibly knew what that person could be, but we can't really make anything of it. 21-year-old Fraka Leaves disappeared from a bar on June 20th, 2006. While at a pub in Paderborn, Germany, she asked if she could call as she was dead. Shortly after making the call at 11 p.m., she said she had to go, and when she left the pub, was never seen again. At 1 a.m. that night, her friend received a text that she was coming home and she didn't worry about her. However, she never came home and reported to the police. It was determined that the text was sent from nearly 35 kilometers away. Over the next week, while next to the police's orders, the friend continued to call Fraki, and every time she would ask a question, Fraki was dodging or give some sort of shitty answer. That was until one day a call was made while the friend was at Frauk's sister, who asked the question, "Are you being held captive?" To which Frauk supposedly said yes very quickly, before saying no very loudly. The phone then went out, and that was the last call made. October 4th of that year, her skeleton was found in the woods near Lindenau, Germany. It's bizarre given that she was alive for a while, was in a situation where she couldn't call out, but was also in a situation that she couldn't send calls, and despite all of that, no leads have been made in the case. We are now on to Tier 4, and this is where we get some of the spooky ones. Zygmunt Adamski disappeared from his home on June 6, 1980 in Yorkshire, England. At 3:30 p.m. that day, he left to go get groceries, kissed his wife goodbye, and disappeared off the face of the earth. Zygmunt was a relatively wealthy businessman who was happy and had life going for him, so it didn't make sense that he would just vanish. 5 days later, 20 miles away, his body was found on top of a 12-foot coal pile in Todmorden. To add to the weirdness of it, the coal facility had been being used all day, and somehow everyone missed a dead body on top of one pile. Not only that, but the pile around the body was perfectly intact, implying that no one climbed up it, especially if no one could have climbed up it without making a scene, and the body had to be hosed from above, which again didn't make any sense as it was just in the middle of a lot. He was very clean and put together, and it didn't look like he was living on the streets while he was out. But to add a layer of weirdness, his clothes were off place. For example, his shirt was missing, and his jacket was buttoned as if someone didn't know how to do the buttons and then one inside out, one misplaced, etc. The same can be said about his shoes and pants. According to the coroner, he had died earlier that day, but what was really weird in the coroner report was that he had burns around his shoulders and neck that were covered in a sort of green goo that no one could identify. After months of deliberation, the coroner eventually said that he died of a heart attack. because that was all I could really make of it. To give you an idea of how absolutely absurd this is, every article I found on this talked about how it was related to aliens, because I don't know what else you'd explain this as. Terry Sutter was 15 years old when he disappeared on September 1st in 1973. His mom had taken him that night to stay with his grandmother in Frankfort, Michigan. His plan was he was to go bowling with friends before staying with his grandmother's. However, after his approached his family was on the look for him, which his body was discovered the next day on the banks of Lake Michigan. Here's where details of the story get kind of weird. So, general consensus, at least from all the research I did, seems that he wasn't actually going bowling with friends. He was instead sneaking out to go to a party around the lake, which makes sense, kids do that kind of thing. And supposedly he disappeared from the party at some point. During the autopsy, it was found that his lungs were not filled with water, but instead filled with sand, implying that it was most likely murder, as it seems someone had held his face in the sand enough for him to inhale it and suffocate. But possibly the weirdest part of all is that as soon as he was buried, his grave was vandalized. The headstone was then repaired, to which it was vandalized again, and this occurred over and over, with ripping out flowers and spray painting on the tombstone, that eventually the family decided to simply bury him at an unmarked grave. So the question of who killed him, who's vandalizing his grave, are they the same person? Are they two different people? Who knows? Also, everyone commenting on this story is like super mean about it, because they're all like, well, maybe he just did something wrong. Hold on, let's not attack a 15-year-old kid who died in the 70s. Not Glenn and Bessie Hyde set out to raft the Colorado River Rapids on October the 20th of 1928. Glenn was significantly cleared in the fastest record time, and Bessie was looking to be the first woman in history to complete it. However, after they didn't make their scheduled stop, a search plane located their empty canoe on December the 19th. The canoe is upright with all of the gear and equipment inside. Picture evidence as well as a journal log from Bessie seems to show that they made it to mile 2.6 marker, however the canoe was found in 2:37. And despite the fact that the rapids should eventually spit out whatever they sat under them, neither of them have ever been seen again. The story is especially famous because over the years several people have claimed to be the living Glenn and Bessie, such as one woman who, while on a tour of the area, proclaimed that she was the surviving Bessie and that she killed her abusive husband and ran away from him. However, that didn't really pan because like the details of the story didn't make sense.
Yes! 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 Oh! Oh! The one run with fucking ignitions don't kill the ants, I get it. Fuck you, you piece of shit boss.
Which, like, the two were on a
Keel over and fucking die.
Yeah.